to deal with, we'll talk about ways to deal with apparent policy violations, being able to deal with policy violations in different ways depending upon the category and levels. And then at the end, we will do some things to give you some specific examples and see what you'll come up with what you've learned. RISE is is an acronym that I use for the Toastmasters values, or what are called the core values. The core values of respect, integrity, service, and excellence. Now, these all come from definitions from Toastmasters International. All I've done is reorganize them and made them into an acronym. Excuse me, an acronym that I can remember. So let's go through them one at a time and point out some key words in these definitions. The idea is that if you are not abiding by the core values of Toastmasters, you are violating Toastmasters policy. It's generally the way it works. So let's talk about respect first. And I want to really focus on that very last phrase, because this defines a lot of things in Toastmasters, including evaluations, right? Critique, but never demean. Critique, but never demean. So if we have somebody that's constantly giving critiques that do demean, that's not according to our core values and therefore is a policy violation. Let's look at some of the others. Integrity. Integrity, again, I like to go to the last phrase. Have the courage to acknowledge our mistakes and always strive to do the right thing. You'll find out some ways when people refuse to acknowledge their mistakes, that's a problem. And if you don't strive to do the right thing, that's questioning and honesty and trustworthiness and all some of these other parts of this core value. Service. We want to provide service and exceptional support. When I say that, that means to all Toastmasters. We need to fulfill their duties as individuals and as an organization to all members. So if we are doing anything that excludes certain kinds of members or certain categories of members, we're violating a policy. We're violating a core value. And let's go then to excellence. This one's much more complex because it encounters or it adds into it something called the Toastmasters promise. But what we want to do here is, under the concept of excellence, we want to nurture a collaborative environment. That is, we work together, find solutions, produce superior service to all of our members. Now, the Toastmasters promise is mentioned here. And by the way, you don't have to take any notes with this slideshow because everything you're seeing here, I will send to everyone that is attending in a PDF form in the slideshow. And you'll see later on in this slideshow, there are also URLs to or some things where I'll be sending you actual copies of documents. But we should know the Toastmasters promise. There's some interesting things buried in there. The policy violations guidance really says if you are following the 4 values that we list here as core values, you can't really be violating any policies. However, what it doesn't really talk about is unintentional violation. But let's come back and look a little bit more at this Toastmasters promise. It should be familiar to all of you, but if it's not, let's walk through it quickly. Because anything that is not in accordance with this Toastmasters promise could be construed as a policy violation, right? Attend club meetings regularly. Prepare all of my projects. prepare for and fill meeting assignments, provide fellow Toastmasters with helpful and constructive evaluations, help club maintain a positive, friendly environment necessarily for all members, and it goes on. By the way, you all signed this Toastmasters promise when you signed the application to become a Toastmaster. This has been there and this way for many, many years. How do I treat my fellow club members? Respect and courtesy, going back to the beginning of Rise. Bring guests, act with Toastmasters core values. That's the big one: integrity, respect, service, and excellence during the conduct of all Toastmasters activities. So let me talk a little bit about a policy violation is. A policy violation is when you see somebody acting not in accordance with those Rise core values. When you see something that's being done that's wrong. So someone that might have an answer to this one, let's just shout it out, because the way I'm showing my screen, I don't see anybody. But my question is, if you see something, meaning something wrong happening, what is the worst thing you can do?
Ignore it.
Ignore it.
That is absolutely right. And I will tell you that we have a culture in District 11 in a lot of cases of simply ignoring things because you don't want to get involved. You don't want to get into any kind of a hassle. But I say to you, if you see something, ignoring it doesn't change behavior, right? So let's say somebody gives a very mean evaluation to somebody, right? If no one says anything to that person, maybe they don't understand what they're doing wrong. How can they improve? How can we improve that person? You can't without some sort of process. The process I want to talk about is a precursor to a formal complaint. Before anything is made official, consider counseling the offender, counseling others to counsel the offender, but always take some action. It might get a ball rolling. At the very minimum, the offender might learn something he did not know, and therefore will change his behavior. So let's talk about a couple of counseling examples. This first one, for those of you that are fastidious readers of our newsletter, I recently did in January, I did a write-up about diversity. When I originally wrote that document, I used this first spelling of Muslim or Muslim. And fortunately for me, I had 2 or 3 readers that read through my drafts, and I was informed that that spelling, that first spelling of Muslim, is not only archaic, but is considered to be derogatory. Now, that was a learning moment for me, and I immediately apologized to that person and changed every spelling of Muslim to Muslim. So when you saw it in the newsletter, it was done properly. It was never my intention to be derogatory toward anybody, but it's an example of an inadvertent situation from which I learned because the person reading my document had the guts to come to me and explain that situation. So let's take another situation and see what we can get from this. A couple of these took place when I was an area director. Now, this was not in District 11, so don't try to figure out any of these, who they might be. There are several examples of things mentioned later, all of which I've seen in other districts, but the names have all been changed to protect the innocents and even to protect the persons that did perpetrate the policy violation. So let's say somebody in a club gives a really harsh evaluation. And that harsh evaluation, you can tell if you're watching an evaluation and you're watching the person who is speaking, and you can tell if they're really hurt, right? You can tell just from looking at them, watching their. And so, what should you do when you have that situation? Rikia, would you call in somebody that raises their hands so they will come back with an answer to that? Because I can't see to be able to call in anybody. If you have an answer to this one, a harsh evaluation, what do you think you should do? Would you call in somebody, Rikia, that has their hand up?
I'm looking for hands to be raised.
Somebody raise your hand. Nobody knows?
There we go. Richard knows.
Okay.
Okay, I'll be brave and answer this. I would say let them complete the evaluation, and perhaps during the meeting general evaluate, like if it's a speech evaluation, during the general meeting evaluation, even if you're not the general evaluator, say something about it. And I think in this case, it's appropriate to say it publicly if it was a speech evaluation, and talk about the rise in the Toastmasters promise and how we are expected to treat each other with kindness and find good things and suggestions for ways to improve.
Okay, I actually agree with most of those words, but let's consider this possibility. Supposing the person didn't know it was harsh. Supposing this is a person giving his first evaluation, he has no idea, maybe hasn't been coached by any of his club officers on how to do an evaluation. So I'd say there's really two pieces that have to happen here, right? I would say that the club officer, maybe the VPE, takes the person aside and says that, and teaches him what's missing, the cookie method, the Oreo method, whatever it has to do with it. That's number one. Number two, I do think the general evaluator's responsibility is to jump in here and say something also, if nothing more than just to praise the speaker for what they did well. But then the next thing, a third thing, would be to go to the person and comfort them. Tell them that person, tell that speaker something, good. I liked when you did this in your speech. Make that person feel good. Now, where this becomes a policy evaluation, where it becomes a policy problem, shall we say, is if there is not that type of environment where the person's willing to listen and the person that got the evaluation is not being comforted. Now, if someone gives a harsh evaluation, we have to be able to discern what the problem is. But if I'm an area director visiting that club, I have no idea whether this is a rookie, whether it's anything else. So I'm suggesting your first action ought to be to speak to the appropriate club officer. The appropriate club officer is usually the president. And I'll take this into the example of an off-colored joke. I was visiting a club, and the person that was telling jokes at the beginning of the meeting to get people warmed up told blonde jokes. Now, those of you that don't know what blonde jokes are, it's really a joke that suggests that blonde women are less intelligent than the rest of us. And in a lot of times, those jokes are sexually demeaning. Nothing was said at the meeting by the evaluator or anyone else. I was there as an area director. I walked up to the person, took him aside and said, look, I'd like to talk to you about something. And when I started talking about this, the person's response was, oh, he's tired of listening to those of you that are being politically correct now. And he started to rant and rave at me. Well, I actually then went to the president, who overheard the ranting and explained to him why this was a bad idea to allow it to happen, and suggested that he counsel that individual. And it turned out that it was solved within the club environment, and the person never did that again. Sometimes a person's initial reaction to something is not anything but maybe just a moment of anger at that moment. All I'm suggesting here is maybe before you take an official act and make some sort of complaint, you try to counsel the individual and others involved. That should be your first step, like you're evaluating the person who's doing something that might be considered a policy violation. You will see that even if you report it to the club officer, that the first level of violations that we take care of really are counseling the individual to make sure the behavior doesn't recur. So before we get into the policy violations reference, everyone clear? Any questions on anything? And again, Ricky, if you see someone raising your hand, just enable them to speak. Anything?
Sam has his hand raised.
Yes, Sam.
I guess my point would be just knowing the whole, try to basically get to know get to know the story. That you don't know the whole story, so you're trying to help everyone get to know what was really going on. So just try to begin the process of getting the story, what happened, why this person did this, or what can be done.
Yes, exactly. And just that actually jumps into what happens when a formal complaint is made about a policy violation. The same thing has to happen. Somebody has to investigate to find out what really happened and try to assess the nature of the problem.
LaDonna has her hand raised.
Yes, LaDonna?
Thank you, Rukia. Well, this is going to go back to the evaluation, but I think any policy violation could fall under this. So I will say, I went to my second Toastmaster meeting and did my icebreaker, and it was brutal, my evaluation. He seemed angry with me, pointed out how horrible my icebreaker was. So I just sat down because at that time, I was still that person. I couldn't make eye contact with people. I was painfully shy. I couldn't speak. I could work a 12-hour shift and not say one word. I had a very difficult time interacting with people. And so when I left, nothing was said during the meeting. And I just presumed, well, maybe something was said afterwards, but I had determined before that meeting was over that I was never coming back. So that is what I base my evaluations on, and the way I treat all the members of my club and the members of the clubs that I visit, because I don't want to come off to where people don't want to return to a Toastmasters meeting. But I did go back and then moved out of town and came back in 2019 and started hammering it head on. So I will say I pushed myself because I didn't want to just give up. You know, I didn't want that one evaluation to just stop me from trying to improve me. So I was able to let it go, but I would think nothing was said in the meeting. I would just presume something was said afterwards, which sometimes maybe that's best to wait until after the meeting to talk to the person that did that, as opposed to in the meeting.
Well, I think the one piece that was missing, though, is you should have been talked to. Someone should have come to you and said, as I described before, talk to you at least. But you're right. The consequence of that is we have a poor quality meeting and people will just walk away from it, right? I'm surprised you came back to the same club. Maybe you didn't.
No, I did.
But that's the problem. If we get the reputation of being an organization that takes beginning speakers and just trashes them, who's going to come? Who's going to be the new people coming in? I will tell you, I have seen, again, in another district, I have seen clubs wonder why they're not gaining members. And when I've gone to people in your situation like this to ask them why they didn't stay with that club, I get answers like that. Evaluations always, and this is my key, evaluations must always build competence and confidence. That does not happen when we trash somebody. So let me go on here. We're now going to get into some of the policy violation categories and some of the details. Now, I'll tell you, I'll be referencing certain documents that give you a long list of things that you can do wrong. We'd be here forever if we went through that tonight. We're not doing that. What we're going to look at today is primarily general categories and give you references. And we'll spend most of the time on what are called club categories of violations, because after all, this is club officer training, not district or international officer training. But the first assessment, as you're looking at a potential violation or looking at a complaint, is where is that occurring? We have three main types of violations, shall we say: international, district, and club. Let's walk through international first. Note that it's an international complaint automatically, regardless of anything else, if there's any threat of litigation or law enforcement involvement in the violation. Keep that in mind. If there's any kind of threat, it's automatically an international complaint, meaning it has to be submitted to the CEO of Toastmasters International. Other than that, you look at a complaint that's received to find out who's doing it. If it's any kind of international officer or an international event or an unresolved district level complaint, it becomes an international complaint. Some of you have a memory of, within the last few years, of the actual Toastmasters International president being removed from office. Now, we don't know exactly why or what happened. We just know that there was a district level complaint against the international officer, and the international went through its confidential process, and it resulted in either the voluntary or involuntary removal of that president of Toastmasters International. So that was an international officer at an international event, I believe. But there's also more than just international officers. Anything that might be a policy violation by accredited speaker, a world champion of public speaking, regional advisors, or international directors or candidates automatically makes the complaint a complaint that has to go to international. And in the manual that I referenced before, it gives you who you have to contact, what information you have to send, et cetera, et cetera. But that's all we're going to say at the moment about international complaints. District complaints. District complaints are anything that happens at above the club level. So an area event, a division event, a district event, or, and this is a big part, an unresolved club complaint. So here's what happens at the district level. Someone comes to me with a complaint. I do a general little investigation to find out if it is really a district level complaint. I haven't had many of these, but almost all of them have been complaints that were about something that happened in a club and therefore a club complaint, not a district complaint. But we're not going to learn about the details of district here. We're going to jump down into a club event, a club complaint. A club complaint is what we're almost always concerned about as club officers. It takes place at a club event. Now, anything that relates to these complaints and any processing associated with them are required to be kept confidential except to the people that have a need to know the outcomes. So that's the thing I want to emphasize. You do not want to, if you make a complaint, the complaint gets solved, it's over. That's the end of it. It's confidential. This item number 3 is very clear in why I attempt to discern the difference between a district level complaint and a club complaint when it comes to me. The district may not intervene in a club complaint unless the club can't resolve the issue. So that's a key also. District may not intervene. If the club takes care of it, I don't even have the right to ask what they did about it.
Rick, there's a question in the chat that says, how do you define an area event?
An event that's run by an area. Examples would be an area speech contest. Examples might be area director training. Might be if it's done by an area director and isn't a district. Those are the best answers that I can give. If there is a formal area visit being done by an area director, and the area director violates policy, I would say that is a district event. That is a district complaint. I want to make one other note before we go into more details of club events. Whistleblowers. People that report things are absolutely protected. Anybody that makes a complaint that is a complaint in good faith cannot have any actions taken against them. That is completely prohibited. Now, once you get to a club issue, and any issue at any level, or any issue of those categories, club issues, district issues, and international issues are broken down into 3 levels of severity. We'll have some practice dealing with these later. Level 1, the most minor level, minor correctable infraction. We talked about that harsh evaluation before. If you observe that, and if counseling is not something that works because you don't know the guy, right? You should report it to club president, or if it's a club president that's doing it, the report goes to the next highest officer. There are some kind of weird things in here. For example, what if it's the VPE that's doing it and the president is his friend? What do you do then? Who's the next highest officer? The VPM. It is the club's choice whether the president investigates or the entire club executive committee becomes involved and investigates it. That's up to the club. Generally, in a level 1 violation, the club president resolves it with the offender. So let's say in the case of that situation whereby we had a harsh evaluation or that off-color joke kind of thing, if the club president talks to the person, counsels the person, and the person's response, like it was with me with Muslim versus Muslim, is, oh my gosh, I never meant to offend anyone. I'm never doing that again. I'm going to learn from this. That's the end. It's done. Doesn't go any further than that. We've solved the problem. The person had learning experience. We've evaluated, we've given the person an evaluation, given them something to strive for. So what is the penalty? Simply correction. Counseling, correction. Level 2. Now what I've done is a lot of the things between the various levels are exactly the same. And in this slideshow, which you'll be getting a copy of, I have highlighted in yellow those things that are new to this different level. Notice that there is no explicit definition of level 2 versus level 1. Simply a more serious or continuing infraction. Who decides whether it's serious or continuing infraction? The club. If the club needs help doing that, they can reach out to International for guidance without having to expose the particular issue that's involved and to get guidance. So a level 2 infraction is more serious or a continuing infraction. That's a big piece here. Let us suppose that after counseling, the person that gives the harsh evaluations or even that off-color joke continued to do it. That makes it to level 2. Now, again, if you see an infraction as a level 2 infraction, still gets reported to the president or the next highest officer. President or the club decides who gets to do the investigation. But now it's required that the club executive committee or the entire membership of the club votes on these subsequent actions. And the subsequent actions are the following as possible penalties. A letter of censure issued to the individual member that was the violator. And these are all ors or all. It's really and ors for each of these. An announcement to club members about what went on. Now, just to club members. A public apology. So let us say in the example of where maybe you had a club member that said something that was demeaning to some class of people that are in your club. And let us suppose, let's take the example of my Muslim versus Muslim. People informed me that Muslim was an incorrect way to do things and was demeaning. And I went and did it again and didn't make any correction. It may be in the club's judgment that I should publicly apologize for that as a way of making sure I don't do it again. Now I'm going to go through one more level for level 2, and then we'll open it up for questions on this because these concepts are pretty important. So level 2, now to level 3. Well, the first one is the same, but this is a continuing situation. You've already had the person continue something that he had was a level 1 violation. It was addressed through a level 2, and now it's continued. He's still telling those blonde jokes, or she's still giving the harsh evaluations, et cetera, et cetera. All these same steps are the same, but now we're at level 3. A level 3 issue is required to be reported to International within 7 days. Now we're really starting to take things seriously. Reported to International within 7 days. In that manual I showed you before, the policy violation manuals tells you who to report it to, how to report it. Level 3 penalties. Interesting, the same as they are for level 2. However, you may, in addition, refer the penalty to International for adjudication of what the penalty ought to be. So you can do all 3 of these things, which is what you did before, and go to international, or you can go directly to international for the penalty. All of these are and/ors. International, at a club's request, will consider the penalty. So, I just want to show you something that drives this too before we open this for questions. There is provided by International a club disciplinary checklist. Whenever a club has to go in for any type of policy violation processing, this form is nice. Remember in level 1 violations, we didn't really do much, right? Well, but we did what was effective. Club members or somebody files a complaint to the president. The investigation person, often the president, completes confidential investigation of the charges. And then the investigating officer discusses the findings with the complainant and change members. If resolved, no further actions are needed, we're done. That's level 1. These other actions that take place related to higher levels. I will be sending you a copy of this disciplinary checklist for your own use with the things that I'll be sending out at the end of this session. So let's open this part up for questions now. Because you're going to have to do with some examples, you're going to have to discern whether the problem is an international complaint, district complaint, or a club complaint. You're going to have to discern or recommend whether it's a level 1, level 2, or level 3 violation. And then you're going to have to recommend potential solutions, or what we would say penalties or solutions. Anybody with questions out there?
Sarah?
Yes. Rick, is there a time limit? A specific, I'm just going to, what, for example, LaDonna's example of if something happened and you waited a year later after the incident happened, say, "Oh, I'm going to complain," then is that too late, or does TI tell you how? Is there like a statute of limit on?
No, there's not really anything specific there. At a club level, especially, what you would do is, you know, the president would look at it and say, "Listen, has this situation already been solved?" Because I guarantee you, if somebody is giving harsh evaluations and that hasn't been solved, it's going to affect other people, right? So most likely, if it comes back a year later, it's already been solved. If it hasn't, then there should be some investigation to find out if it's something that has to go forward. That's how I would recommend that to take place.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, anybody? I can't see your hands, so Ricky, just tell me if there's anybody.
Oh, I
Hi.
see. Elaine has unmuted.
Hi. On this form, it's a little hard for me to read, but as you're moving through the levels, when it talks about the date started, do you do this checklist at a level 1 as it progresses to maybe a level 2 or level 3? Is that the intent of this checklist form?
Yes, so you can come back. This checklist form starts with hopefully a level 1, but you could start it out with a level 2 or level 3, but the checklist is good for the club to keep so they can remember that, oh yeah, there was already a level 1 violation by this person, right? Therefore, this happens again, that should be a level 2. So this would be kept in the club's records.
Thank you. Just another question. I apologize. I was disconnected for a little bit if I'm doing a recap, but what do you do if there is uncertainty or disagreement on whether it is worthy of a disciplinary checklist within the club.
Well, what you do then is you take it to the executive committee of the club. Well, it's up to you can either take it to the executive committee of the club and vote, or take it to the membership and vote.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Brenda had her hand raised. Brenda, do you still have a question?
I do not. She asked a question that was forming in my mouth. So thank you very much.
Matthew,
Yeah, just to clarify, so the one item said that a threat of litigation or law enforcement goes straight to international. Is that the sort of thing where someone says, I'm going to sue you, or I'm going to call my lawyer, or something like that? Is that what we mean by threat of litigation?
Yes, exactly. Or any other threat you might be able to discern of litigation. Yeah. All right,
Thank you.
we're going to have a little fun here. We're going to go through 5 operational situations. What's going to happen here is, without you getting any without you needing to participate at all, you will be randomly assigned into a special workroom with one of these operational situations in place. You will then work together and try to give some solutions. But let me walk through these first. I'm going to read them as they are. There are 5. Your VPE refuses to help you enroll in pathways. So you're a member of the club. When you're preparing to give a speech, he hands you copies of some old manual. No one in the club is pathways enrolled. A complaint to the president resulted in no action. Number 2, you're the president of your club and you receive a call from one of your members, Peyton Member 1 Esquire, about something Joe Member 2 said at a club meeting that Peyton says was sexist. Number 3, as an area director visiting a club, you notice the only component is table topics. You note that no one in the club has completed any levels in the previous 2 years, and another member remarks that it's been a long time since a speech was given. Number 4, the club director has paid dues for a couple of members out of club funds. This was necessary to keep the membership level of at least 8. And 5, a club member gives a scathing and unhelpful evaluations. Now, not in this district, so don't try to figure out if this ever happened here. I belonged to multiple districts before that. These are actual complaint situations that I have seen. So what will happen is this. You'll get randomly assigned to a waiting room. You're going to read the situation assigned to the room. So for example, if you get assigned to meeting room number 5, you get to deal with number 5. When you are in your room, you will see on your screen all 5 of these. Just make sure you know what room you're in to pick the right one for to deal with. Rikia, you said you had a way for them to easily tell what room they were in once they got there, if there was any question.
yes, when you are inside your breakout room, if you move your mouse over to the left corner, it will tell you Zoom meeting participant ID, and it'll tell you what room number you are in.
Okay. Now, wrong way. Once you get there, this is what I want you to do as a team. Select a spokesperson, because your results are going to be announced by that spokesperson when you come back. One person. You determine from the reading whether the situation is a club, district, or international complaint, and be prepared to say why. Specify the violation level. Now I have these set up so that you just need to say whether you thought it was a minor, serious, or a high severity violation based on what you've read about that situation. You will then suggest the actions to be taken, that is, the penalties to be paid, if any. We haven't gotten into what penalties are there at the district or the international level. So if it's at the international level, you just suggest what you think ought to be done there. And then come back to the main session when done. You're going to have a time limit on this. Rikia, what time is it?
It is 7:46.
7:46. So we have about 45 minutes left, right? So 45 minutes divided by 2. Each 45 minutes divided by 2. Okay. You get 15 minutes. You get 15 minutes at the most to do all of these things and to be able to come back into this room and be prepared for that. Now, if your team gets done early, you can still come back and we'll come in the main session, talk about some things perhaps. But when all the clubs are back, and when all the rooms are back, we will then listen to the assessment of each person and ask them questions about them. Any questions before we go? Okay, Rikia, tell them what's going to happen. Anyone who's not here, raise your hand.
The rooms are all closed.
All right, I hope you had a little fun with this. I tried to bury some clinkers in some of these. We'll find out how it went. Let's start with room number 1. Your VPE refuses to help you enroll in pathways. When you're preparing to give a speech, he hands you copies of some old manual. No one in the club is pathways enrolled. A complaint to the president resulted in no action. The spokesman for room number 1 is Leroy Richens.
Hello and good evening. We came to the conclusion that, I hope this works right, that we came to the conclusion that there's really 2 problems here, and that because the VPE and the club president are on the same, have the same issue, that no one is using the pathways, that everybody's using old books, that this issue needs to be taken to the district level, or up one, partly because people are not being able to use the pathways, but also because it seems that the administrative team needs to be trained on using pathways and getting everybody on board with that rather than using old junk.
And it's a violation of Toastmasters promise, right?
Yeah, disrespect to everybody.
Anybody have any questions for this team? Is it really that cut and dried? In reality, think of yourself as a member of the club. Would you report it to anybody, really? And the answer is that you should. Another path might suggest that if we have both the president and the VPE breaking or not compliant, you might go to the VPM. Now, in a lot of cases, when I've seen clubs like this, the clubs have had very low enrollment. And a lot of times the president might have 3 or 4 roles, and you might have no choice. The most important part is it says when the complaint to the president resulted in no action, it means that it was not resolved at the club level. Not resolved at the club level, and the complaint still exists, it has to go to the district. Unresolved. Any questions on number 1? If you do, got to raise your hand or just start talking, one or the other. All right, room number 2, you're president of your club and you receive a call from one of your members, Peyton Member 1 Esquire, about something Joe Member 2 said at a club meeting that Peyton says was sexist. Who is the spokesman for room number 2?
You'll need to unmute.
We can't hear. You need to
She's-
unmute.
She's working to unmute.
Okay. I thought you could just unmute her.
Yeah, me too. Okay, yeah, I was having a hard time unmuting, and what I was saying is, believe it or not, the spokesperson is the latecomer from Los Angeles. But anyway, we had a great group. We had a fabulous conversation about number 2. We said expel them both and keep going. No, I'm just teasing. I'm working on my comedy. Yes. So we decided, our group decided first. Is this a club complaint only? We decided that this is a club complaint right at this moment. It's a club complaint only. And based on our understanding, we came to that determination. Then we wanted to find out from person number 2 what was actually said, the actual words that were used. Was it really sexist, or was member number 1 who lodged the complaint just being a little overly sensitive to what was said? The other issue that arose was that we should talk to each one separately first and ask member number 1, of course, why did they feel like it was sexist? Now, depending on what the outcome is between meeting separately with member number 1 and separately with member number 2 and finally together, if they can come to an agreement, then that stops it right there in its tracks. If it becomes argumentative or combative, then we move to another level of discussion with them. And one of the things that arose was finding out, is there any bad history with these 2 members? Has this happened before? What is the relationship between the 2? Is there a justification for lodging this complaint by member number 1? So we wanted to flush out any background relationships, any background history between the 2. Has this happened before, as I said before? Then we said that if it's combative or argumentative, then we've decided we've got to let the district know or the division know that we are supportive of the division. We would provide the district with whatever information we've gathered, so letting them know that we are very supportive of whatever results they determine. My team members can jump in at any time. And we decided that this was a level 1 violation.
Okay.
So we wanted to provide the district and why we chose to escalate it to the next level. I believe that was pretty much it.
Is there anyone in the audience that thinks that disagrees with that conclusion? I guess I have a question. Page number 1, Esquire. You know what Esquire means after someone's name?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I went to law school.
Okay. She's an attorney.
Yeah.
So that asked the question myself. You didn't think there's any risk of litigation?
We didn't discuss that. We didn't even address Esquire, them being a member of the bar. So I don't think we felt it was that important. What the group really felt was important, was there any history between member 1 and member 2? And if there was history there, and had this been lodged before or the complaint surfaced before, they felt that was extremely important. But I certainly feel like what you're bringing up is important as well.
Yeah, so
Well, I think,
go ahead, somebody.
I'm sorry. I think it becomes important after the conversation, because depending on the outcome of those conversations, and I'm sorry, my earbuds are awful.
Yeah.
If member number 1, Esquire, is just petty, then we could get that figured out. But if it escalates and it looks like there's that potential, then certainly it would get escalated up to international.
Yeah, the reason I put this attorney in here was so that you'd evaluate whether or not litigation is a potential consequence. It's really a judgment call to be made by the club, but I would always err on the side of being very careful. You know, it might be different. Supposing this Peyton member Esquire was representing one of your other club members. And so it's actually you're talking to the attorney. You're not talking to the attorney. That would mean you should immediately admit, the minute someone identifies them as an attorney on someone else's behalf, that assumes litigation, right? So I think you should have at least considered the possibility this goes and becomes a international escalation. And the likelihood, by the way, of you knowing that someone's really an attorney is low. And that's why I kind of put that in there. But I think your assessment of if it was a club situation, the assessment is good. I think that you also kind of added in the district involvement. You know, the district would never get involved unless the club invited them in. So if based on the discussions you have with the people, you wanted the district to intervene because you didn't think you'd handle it yourself, that's great. It's great. Okay, number 3. As area director visiting a club, you notice the only component is table topics. You note that no one in the club has completed any levels in the previous 2 years. A member remarks it's been a long time since a speech was given.
Good evening.
Room 3.
Good evening. This was a fun one. At first glance, it appears that it might be the area director is a problem, but the area director is the one that noticed the problem. And so we thought that first of all, we need to find out if this has been reported before. And since it's gone on for 2 years and area directors should visit a couple of times a year, somebody probably knew about this and didn't report it, or they did report it and nothing happened. So it could either be a level 1 or level 2, and it could either be, well, certainly a club level, but it could be district as well. And we decided that the area director at a minimum needs to sit down with the executive committee and maybe find out what's going wrong. This is a great opportunity for coaching. Sit down with the executive committee and find out why this is happening. It could be that they just want to be a social club and not do any speeches, or it could be a whole new slate of officers who participated under the old regime that treated it as a social club. And there could be members there that want to do real speeches and do the things that we do in Toastmasters. And it may be worthwhile also to talk with the entire membership or survey the club members to find out what they want out of the club. And that's about it. One place thing that we thought about was that the area director may not have been doing a good job of club visits for the past couple years, because they really should have caught this. And definitely the area director needs to look at the club success plan to see if anybody's actually advancing in education. That's what we came up with.
Anybody got any questions for team 3?
Well, I have a question. I've always been concerned about what is required and what is recommended by TI. Recently, our Pathways ambassador shared with us that doing evaluations for a speech to get credit is absolutely not required. This shocked 90% of the people in the room. And of course, I picked up the phone and called to see if that was actually true, and it was. And so I'm wondering if a club who in District 1, we have several clubs that are specialty clubs that don't do prepared speeches. And my suspicion is that they don't do pathways either. Many of our clubs that do speeches, they don't do pathways either, even though they do prepared speeches. So I'm wondering if we really have a grip on what is required as opposed to what is recommended by TI. So I'm not saying that that's a question. It's just that it's something I've been concerned about ever since our Pathways ambassador told us that we do not have to do evaluations of speeches.
Well,
So,
that's big news to me because everything I've read says that evaluations are required, including the Toastmasters promise that I just read. So
yeah,
if you have somebody that has you contacted International that specifically said you don't have to have your speeches evaluated for credit, please send me that information because I need to talk to that person and go
okay,
out of their way to make sure every speech that I give is evaluated. Insofar as I don't know if I understand properly the difference between a prepared speech not being a pathways speech, because I don't know how you advance without giving a speech in a pathway. But I do want to make a comment. So there's some things I don't understand there, but I don't want to belabor this here. I
sure.
think there was
If you put your contact, because I want to find out, because I did call TI and I called Education Department. And 720-439-5050 extension 2. So I know it by heart because I call them often enough. And yes, I'll be happy to follow this up because I'd like to know. But she is a Pathways ambassador. She's a DTM. She's been in Toastmasters a long time. And the response was, we recommend evaluations because of the benefit derived, but we don't require. But I will be happy to take your information and let's talk offline. Thank you.
Well, everyone will get an email from me. So the other thing I just want to
Okay.
quickly
Thank you.
mention is that I forgot what it was completely. So I think you did a good job of evaluating how you would look at some of these things. There's a concept of a social club. Did you see anybody see anywhere in that Toastmasters promise that talked about social only clubs? If we have a social club, they're not fulfilling the requirements of Toastmasters policy. If a
And,
social club is defined as not giving speeches.
and can a club be disbanded involuntarily if they continue to not give speeches?
You would have to follow up whatever the process is. First, the complaint would be issued at the club level for the club to take care of or not. If it's a continuing problem, then it does have to come to the district. The
Okay.
district would have to decide what to do. Okay, let's move along to room number 4. The club treasurer has paid dues for a couple members of club funds. This is necessary to keep the club membership level at least 8. Room number 4, who's the spokesman?
Sam. Yeah, there's a lot to consider here. First one, in terms of the investigation, it depends upon who else knew about this. If, for example, if it's a president, you would not have the president do an investigation. You might actually end up with the executive committee. It just depends. So that's one thing. Another thing to look at is the treasurer. We got to find out, was this the first time? What had this happened before? What the intent? The treasurer wants to keep the club at 8, but we need to find out about the treasurer. With all that in mind, it comes down to then we've got to figure out how to make a decision or how to get this. There is definitely wrong with the money that's being paid and should not come out of the club funds. Part of the resolution process is trying to, the neat way to end it would be having those couple members pay the dues out of their own pocket, reimburse the club, so everything's back in shape. If that doesn't happen, then it goes, you take a different path. Depending upon how things resolve, it could keep, if everything resolves nicely, it can be kept within the club. If there are things that are left undone that could escalate above the club level, you get some concerns that the district and Toastmasters International have to consider. So basically this whole thing just depends, as you investigate the various paths, can determine how far, how neatly this can be resolved.
There were several examples in the policy violations manual that relate to the misuse of funds. For example, you can't give funds to other clubs, for example, and different things like that. So you gave a good, nice, succinct solution there. Lastly, room number 5. A club member keeps giving scathing and unhelpful evaluations. Who's the spokesman for room number 5?
Hi, I can't see what I look like. This is new, but so I apologize if that's distracting. But for room number 5, we had the situation where a club member keeps giving scathing and unhelpful evaluations. And we discussed it, and we thought this was a club level type of situation. The way it's worded with keeps giving, we thought that implied that it had at least happened once before. And this might be the second or third time, but the first level or the first part would be that opportunity for someone to coach or counsel kind of the person on a side after the meeting or on the level. We also really thought it was important that we look at giving a positive statement, or another member at a recap to give a positive statement to the person who gave the speech. That would be essential. And as part of the counseling, which since it comes to the second two might be another way to help that member progress, is to encourage them to actually watch and listen to evaluations on the Toastmasters YouTube or website as an idea to get to see the variety, because we had a discussion about sometimes people have different experiences and what they think they are doing is helpful, and they don't realize it's not helpful. So trying to get that education and that point across to them. And if it went to level 2, we would expect, in general, if there was a vote or within the executive committee, to, at the club level, make a general announcement is where we're going to have a discussion about what is a helpful evaluation and what is not helpful, and what you want to do as a club to move forward and help everyone in the group improve. So that was our take on it.
And we went through some of those considerations earlier. So, all right. First thing I want you to do is very important. I want everybody to clap from everybody else, because I think you did an outstanding job in putting these together. Rakia, please remove your share so I can get back to mine. Hopefully. Well, I can't do anything here, Rakia. So I'm just going to tell y'all, I think. Okay.
Try to find where you were, and I'll get it up there for you.
We're just gonna have to end this because we're out of time. But I'm telling you what I'm going to give you. In the slideshow, second to the last slide, is a listing of places you can look for more details in all of this. Policy 1.1 is the core values, and I'll have the URL and everything in there, so you don't have to do anything more to find it. You can just click on the slideshow or what I send you. There's also policy 3.0, which covers ethics and conduct and gives you all the list of bad things you can also do that would cause to have a policy violation. The same thing is true with policy protocol 3.0, ethics and conduct. And then I'll also give you a link to the Toastmasters promise. The next thing that I will send you by email, each of you, will be a PDF copy of the slideshow. So you don't need PowerPoint to use it. The form that I showed you with the club disciplinary checklist, form 728CC, and then publication 471, I'll send you a copy of also that quick reference guide that we've been talking about. So what do I want you to do? To rise to the top means to understand that we need to use our ethics, all those things that the R stands with: respect, integrity. I got to remember what it's service and excellence. And we do that. If we don't do that, we are really violating official Toastmasters policy, and we are not serving our members. So when somebody violates that policy, the worst thing you can do is do nothing. If you see something going wrong or see something going bad, at the minimum, say something. Thank you all for coming this evening, and I hope you learned a lot.
Thank you.